Alright. Is everyone good?
Yeah.
Alright, let's start the time. We are from Marshall Christian New Home, the CDC 15 rights are 1 in every 3 women have experienced intimate partner violence, sexual inability to access money, 1% highlights the financial dependency, one of the key ways that abusers control the victims, abusers deny their access to employment, prevent financial independence, indicative when and how the victims can spend money. This is why Fate 19 Human Park finds financial abuse an invisible form of intimate partner violence, which prevents her from ever breaking free. Conclusively, Atlantic finds that access to financial resources is the best predictor of whether an intimate partner violence survivor will leave. Pacific Standard 18 confirms that 73% of intimate partner violence survivors stated they were unable to escape due to lack of financial safety. Although the current solution in place is means as to welfare, Smith of Grenoble University 19 finds that the link between welfare and paid work systematically disadvantages women. Consequently, Karen Lindhurst of the UW report on 19 reports that less than 3% of clients received intimate partner violence services. Specifically, the system cannot identify and help victims for 3 reasons. The first is stigma. Hammy Greer Little in their book Violence of Victims 2000 highlight that women refuse labels like battery to avoid the associated stigma and the shame and embarrassment generated by abusers make the topic discussing the topic painful. This is why they find that 37% of those abused self-identify as victims of intimate partner violence, as even welfare cannot track who needs help. Second is retaliation. According to Urban, the UNC Chapel Hill OA, many women conceal abuse because they fear retaliation. For instance, women in 15 finds that 40% of women in abusive relationships have child care benefits taken by their abuser, which starts to withdraw child support if their victims come forward. In fact, as Urban continues, this leads many to deny their own experiences to avoid consequences problematically because victims choose to conceal abuse, they prevent welfare from ever reaching them. The third is preventing work. According to the University of Bristol 19, because women are traditionally allocated informal domestic labor such as childcare, which is not recognized by welfare, women's ability to pursue work and other opportunities severely limited. Additionally, when welfare attempts to emphasize personal responsibility by encouraging entry to the workforce, the Taylor Institute 4 explains that abusers often use violence to keep their partners out of job training programs, which is why intimate partner violence causes women to lose 8 million days of paid work each year. Even if they do enter the workforce, discriminatory wage policies and work benefits render employment insufficient for financial independence. This cycle of abuse must be reversed now. As Women Aid furthers that ensuring all women have a safe place to go when they leave an abusive relationship is literally a matter of life and death. Womack furthers enabling women to independently rebuild their lives should be the core of intimate partner abuse policy. Fortunately, a UBI would help survivors escape with guaranteed unconditional income that could ultimately help them find a new home. This occurs in 3 ways. The first is through fighting the patriarchy. According to Flanagan of State 18, a UBI would formally recognize socially valuable labor that people perform outside of the paid economy. UBI could amount to wages for housework. This is key as slave furthers that by trusting women to spend their money how they see fit, UBI would push against decades of paternalistic social policy. The second is through fostering independence. Unlike welfare, which ties benefits to the household, Womack of the Independent 19 finds that the UBI would be attached to individuals. Clappers of the Brookings Institute 17 explains that these payments are likely to be digitized at the electronic payment process, which requires more stringent identification documentation, which make it harder for ghost recipients to remain undetected. This can be seen in India, where the TFR 19 rights to the digital payment accounts made it impossible for men to unilaterally access wives' bank accounts. Clapper of the Brookings Institute 17 finds that in India, the UBI led to the creation of 250 million bank accounts over 4 years, concluding it was, quote, an opportunity to open accounts for savings and payments, build transaction histories, improving credit access. The Clapper of the Brookings Institute 17 concludes that UBIs are accompanied with the obligation to open a new bank account, which is why implementation in Mongolia achieved universal account ownership. The third is through leverage. Not only does the UBI serve as a financial escape route, but Moab furthers it also psychologically frees women to consider leaving as a legitimate and practical possibility. As a result, Kalinitsky of Western University 18 concludes that the UBI gives women the power to more credibly threaten to leave an abusive relationship, putting them in a better position to speak their mind. Thus, Flanagan of Slate 19 finds that this leverage through the UBI will allow for better addressing workplace mistreatment as improves women's bargaining position, enabling them to negotiate for more flexible hours or better conditions. Empirically, harsher Princeton 18 finds that receiving a UBI, the number of women who reported abuse by their husbands fell by 51%, and instances of forced sexual acts declined by as much as 66%. The impact is empowering women. Martin, in his book, This Life 15 finds that when the UBI was tested in Canada, largely contained power of violence was seen facilitated by reduction in the material dependence of women on their abusive partners, hence granting the ability to exit destructive relationships. This is key to the decision to support women today will change the lives of those around them. Angelotti 19 finds that multiple benefits and additional financial range of resources brings to households coping with violence creates a ripple effect to change social norms and encapsulates the whole community. Devoren of AU News, this argument should come first. Devoren of AU News 15 explains that the lack of attention paid to intimate partner violence creates the impression that it's irrelevant in American culture. From news articles to policy making, this is extremely problematic, as went to the Conservation 14 rights that if violence against women is not recognized or discussed in the public realm, people are less likely to speak up about their experiences. Until we acknowledge male violence against women, the justification, trivialization, no comfortableness of saying something about intimate partner violence will remain focusing on intimate partner violence is crucial. As Shepard of the UNPA explains that enforced ignorance makes women more vulnerable to sexual violence, and the services they need become less accessible, thus reaffirmed.
Can I real quick see the can I see the Martin card in this book?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Very good.
I
Wait, that's not. Wait, you asked for Martin. No, that's not the card. You're asking the Canada thing,
also.
right?
Sorry.
Yeah,
yeah.
Sorry.
That's not it. Alright, let me actually put the link because it's too small to read. Okay.
I'm gonna run a little bit of time.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so this is the part about domestic violence, the part that we read.
We're gonna run a little bit more.
Sure. Is everyone ready? We negate resolve. The United States should replace means-tested welfare programs with a universal basic income. Our sole contention is destroying the American safety net. Wait, hold on, sorry. Am I reading the right case? Yeah, hold on, sorry. We negate our sole contention destroying the American safety net. Arkedo 19 of the Hill explains that the UBI is an unconditional cash payment to all citizens regardless of wealth or unemployment status. While good in theory, Arkedo continues that a UBI would cause prices on goods and services to increase, as sellers assume that the average person can afford more, sparking an upward spiral where prices and incomes inflate. Consequently, he concludes that the rise in prices would negate all possible benefits gained by a UBI. Unfortunately, the implementation of a universal basic income at the expense of means-tested welfare hurts those reliant in 4 ways. The first is earned income tax credits. Rector 16 of the Heritage Foundation explains that EITC, or Earned Income Tax Credit, is a means-tested welfare program designed to give low-income individuals and families a refundable tax credit in the form of cash transfer payments that covers over 25 million people receiving benefits, which is critical for 2 reasons. Subpoint A, increasing employment. The Center of Budget and Policy Priorities in 2015 explains that since the value of EITC grows with each additional dollar of earnings, people are incentivized to join the labor force, which has encouraged over 460,000 people to join the labor force. Subpoint B is increasing education. CBPP previously cited finds that income support from EITC makes college more affordable for low-income families associated with significant increases in their college attendance, which has helped carry over 10 million people out of poverty. The second reason is Medicaid. The U.S. government reports that Medicaid is a means-tested welfare program designed to give those unable to afford regular medical service, providing life-saving health coverage to over 72 million Americans. Repealing Medicaid would hurt the citizens in 2 ways. Subpoint A is lives. Himmelstein 17 of the Washington Post estimates that for every 400 people covered under Medicaid, 1 life is saved per year due to access to life-saving drugs, care, and surgeries, concluding that ending Medicaid would cause over 44,000 deaths annually. Subpoint B is poverty. Wagnerman 17 of the Center for Children and Families finds that Medicaid covers recurring payments such as drugs, therapy, or general health care, reducing poverty among its beneficiaries by 17.1 percentage points. Third, Section 8 housing. Harvard University in 2018 explains that Section 8 is a means-tested welfare program that allows private landlords to rent apartments and homes at fair market rents to qualified low-income tenants, with voucher holders paying 30% of their income while the program covers the rest. Indeed, Fisher 15 of the CBPP concludes that Section 8 vouchers have reduced the share of families that have lacked a home of their own by over 80% and lifted 2.8 million people, including 900,000 children, out of poverty. This program is critical to providing affordable housing, as the National Low-Income Housing Coalition in 2018 finds that without Section 8, one would have to make $45,000 a year to pay for the cheapest alternative. However, replacing Section 8 with a UBI would fail to provide financial coverage for housing, as Matthews 19 of Vox confirms that getting rid of all American welfare programs would only cover an annual UBI of less than $13,000 a year. Crucially, CDC in 2019 estimates that homelessness is associated with an increased mortality rate that is 9 times higher than those not homeless. Fourth, SNAP programs. Carlson 18 of the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities indicates that SNAP is a means-tested program that helps purchase food for nearly 42 million Americans, providing a critical foundation for health and well-being for low-income Americans and lifting millions out of poverty. Indeed, Ratcliffe 10 of the Urban Institute furthers that SNAP reduces the likelihood of being food insecure by more than 30%. Critically,
Bahari 17 of the New York City Department of Health concludes that SNAP is the most effective way to tackle food insecurity by eliminating the hunger barrier to success, breaking the intergenerational cycle of food poverty, and bolstering educational success in the long term. Thus, we negate. Ready for girls?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, we're cross.
You can have first question.
Alright, so let me just get down real quick. Actually, do you want to just use your timer? It's fine.
Sure.
Okay, let's start the time now. So let's talk about the safety net as a whole. So
Sure.
at the top, you read that inflation is going to increase with the UBI, right?
Yeah.
How much would it increase?
How much? Enough to offset all benefits.
How much is that?
Enough to offset all benefits.
So what credibility does Archetto of the Hill have in saying what can undermine a UBI?
What? Okay, he's done a lot of research. Like, I can pull up the creds for him if you want.
I just want to know like how he concludes that it's going to negate the perceived gains of a UBI if you can't even tell me how much
Okay, so
inflation
think about
increases.
this. If everyone gets increased like $12,000 and I, as a seller, know that you can afford more, it's obvious for me to charge more.
So will they be okay? So
Okay,
is
so
your
what's
argument
the
that these
purpose
people
of a business?
is your argument that these people won't be able to afford goods once inflation rises?
They will be, but they'll have the exact same purchasing power as before the UBI.
Okay, so you're not arguing that they can't afford the goods. You're just saying like it's just like purchasing power goes
I'm
down.
saying that
Wait,
your
why would their
argument-
purchasing power go down if like they can afford the goods? Like I'm
Wait,
confused.
what?
So like the price is increased, but you're saying that they can't afford it. It's
No,
just more
I'm just saying
expensive.
that their purchasing power stays the same or goes down because sellers raise prices.
So why would sellers raise prices if the people can't afford it?
What? No.
Why would the
they're
sellers
raising
raise
prices? Okay, think about it like this, right? Insofar as you give $13,000 to every single person, they have a clear incentive to just raise prices to the point.
Yeah,
where
but if the people can't consume as much because the prices
But
of
they're
goods
still
went up,
paying
then
more,
companies
right?
also have an inherent incentive to bring the
Wait.
prices down, or else
Wait,
people aren't
if
going
they
to buy
just
anything.
increased prices to the point where demand was before the UBI, they're getting more money, right?
So then it's just like a shift then. So it's
Sure,
not
but
like so then what's the terminal
that
impact
just
of
proves
that?
the warrant
Like what's the impact then?
that the UBI has no impact. Can I have a question? We've been on this for a long time.
Sure.
Okay, let's talk about financial, your first warrant under abuse, financial abuse. Is it like, is it like partners taking welfare benefits from women?
Yeah, so that's exactly what it is.
Okay, so what's to stop them from taking like UBI benefits?
So that's the uniqueness that we read from the Clapper evidence on our second warrant about fostering independence. What our Clapper evidence indicates is that one, because like we can give multiple warrants, but the one I'll tell you in cross right now is that because like a UBI, there would be a lot of ghost recipients and you can't track where the money
what
goes.
are ghost recipients?
So it's like if you just like openly give out like 1K to families, you can't track like where that money is going. That's why empirically when you look to implementations of UBI and like samples that have been done in other countries, it's come alongside with the creation of new bank accounts, specifically 260
So the
million bank
government is
accounts were
going to
created
make
in
new
India.
bank accounts to put money in?
Yep.
So like how does that prevent people from still taking the money?
Yeah, so our CFR evidence says that like if you basically like allow for them to create new bank accounts, then these like abusers cannot access their victim's account. They cannot like, unilaterally access their victim's accounts, which is why empirically when we've had like UBI samples in developing countries, we've seen that there was a decrease in domestic violence.
Sure.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
Are welfare benefits like permanent if you're like when do welfare benefits phase out?
What do you mean?
So like if my wage increases by like a certain amount and welfare benefits phase out,
Yeah, I would
like,
say programs such as SNAP phase out.
so isn't that just bad then?
Why?
Because like if we prove that the phased out benefits outweighs the marginal increase in wages, then doesn't that just mean it's bad for like them to like get
No,
off? So
because they're pulling themselves out of poverty.
okay, are you taking a breath?
No. Okay, so I'm gonna start on the framing for IPV and then go down their case. Alright, is everyone good?
Framing at the bottom of your case, or should I flow like?
It's the framing Praveen right at the bottom. It's just like I'm just gonna kind of reiterate, explain
It's
why
right at the
it
bottom of
matters.
the case, yeah.
Yeah, it's at the bottom. Cool. Because chapter of the UNFPA explains that enforced ignorance makes women more vulnerable to sexual violence and services they need become less accessible. We have to put this at the top of the round insofar as if any of their offense is not related to IPV, kick it, because they have to relate everything. Because if we allow means-tested welfare to be seen as the solution, we don't get to the root of the issue. But now in their case, first on destroying the American safety net, as a top-level response, I would say you need to turn the argument because of benefit cliffs. Means-tested benefits have strict income thresholds, meaning just marginal increase in wages can result in recipients losing all their benefits. According to Illinois policy, a $10 increase in wages an hour could cause a household to suffer a net loss in household resources of about $9,000 dollars as reduced government benefits more than cancel out the higher wages. Indeed, they would need an hourly wage 4.6 times larger in order to mitigate the impact of lost benefits. That means citizens are always going to choose minimum wage jobs, which means they don't have any economic mobility. But then on inflation, one, I'd say companies know that money circulation on the net doesn't increase, which is why they don't start hiking prices. But even if they did, it would only last in the short term because they would realize they overestimate the increased purchasing power and bring prices back down. The medium concludes that inflation would either increase or decrease by 0.1%. That's terminal defense. That's why literally UBIs in Lebanon, Sub-Saharan Africa, Kuwait, Mexico, India, all these places didn't see any inflation. But then on EITC, according to Bell 19 of the Intercept, the EITC doesn't reach those in need. It goes towards people who work in taxable jobs, excluding caregivers, disabled, elderly students, or those working in the informal economy who account for 75%. But turn it because it lowers wages. Mount at the U Michigan finds because it only applies to those who work. It artificially inflates the demand for work relative to the demand for labor. It gives disproportionate leverage to employers who can now offer jobs with lower incomes and benefits. This is known as corporate welfare. That's why for every dollar spent through the EITC, employers decrease wages by 30 cents. A guaranteed basic income would have the opposite effect as Mount furthers that it increases worker bargaining power with every dollar spent basic income increasing wages by 40 cents. But then on Medicaid, turn it for 5 reasons. A comprehensive report by the University of Virginia with studies over 893,000 individuals over the span of 4 years finds that compared to those without health insurance, Medicaid patients were 13% more likely to die, stay in the hospital for 50% longer, and cost 20% more. There's 4 warrants for this. 1, Roya Forbes explains that medical reimbursement rates are so low that hospitals lose money on every Medicaid patient they treat. Thus, doctors refuse to see Medicaid patients, and thus these patients can't access routine checkups. 2nd, Medicaid costs patients 26% more than private insurance, which means people can't even afford the healthcare Medicaid provides. Literally, Roy concludes that people on Medicaid do worse than people with no insurance at all. 3, Medicaid pays physicians far below market rates, specifically 58% of what private insurers pay them for comparable services, means doctors choose not to be a part of Medicaid. That's why 63.5% of Medicaid patients were unable to get an appointment before. Those on Medicaid are treated in low volume surgical centers versus high volume ones. High volume ones are correlated to superior medical care. They're getting worse on net. Then on Section 8, housing, turned the argument for 3 reasons. Olson of the University of Virginia quantifies that housing assistance has a substantial disincentive effect on the poor. It leads to lower labor earnings because people won't work if the government is paying their rent. He writes that recipients of vouchers lose $3,600 of income every year. Lazar of the Fiscal Policy Institute continues that after vouchers were expanded, the gap between the rich and the poor in Washington, D.C. grew by 1.8 times. 2nd, Turner of the Urban Institute finds that government housing aid leads to increases in rent. This is because landlords exploit voucher recipients by squeezing more money out of their pockets. Proprietors raise rent not to only cover voucher money, but disposable income as well. Lucas Waldron of the Oakland City Council writes the numerous counties voucher usage increased rents by 14.1%, hurting people on and off the program. And 3, housing subsidies increase the demand for housing and increase the cost of total housing, which offset benefits to voucher holders. The increased government cost of the program. Taylor 16 quantifies each 10% increase in vouchers in housing markets increase monthly rents by 2%. And on homelessness specifically, domestic violence prereqs any homelessness because the NCDP finds that 50% of homeless women and children report to have left their homes due to domestic violence. But then on SNAP, turn the argument for 2 reasons. A, dependency. Tanker of the Cato Institute finds that SNAP can make recipients dependent on the government. Empirics prove as SNAP participation in a previous period increases the propensity to participate in the next period by 30%. But 2nd, on fraud. According to the Chicago Tribune, $1 billion are lost annually to food stamp trafficking. This is crucial because Constable of Forbes finds that literally 2 million people were cut off from food stamps for this reason. UBI solves this. People control their money and they can buy food at the store. There's no way for trafficking to happen. But at the end of the day, the reason why our IPV argument is always going to outweigh literally every single one of their welfare arguments is because Women Aid explains to you that 40% of these welfare benefits get taken away and only 3% of women right now can access IPV services. At that point, in their world, women will continue to be abused and there will be no solution. At the point in which domestic violence is the biggest impact in this round, we have to weigh it first.
Okay, what was the price? Actually, can I see the inflation evidence at the top about 0.5% decrease?
Yeah, and then afterwards, I would like to see only the stuff that says that they do worse with on Medicaid. They do worse than non-insured people.
Okay.
It's all in the card top.
So sorry, what were they? Inflation and what was the other one? Oh, the Medicaid stuff? Oh yeah, okay. It's kind of long. I'll just show you the part that you asked for. The study's kind of long though. Okay. Yeah. So 1 second. Let me just highlight it. Yeah, okay. This this is like the part that we cite about the compared to those that in the bottom is like all the warranty.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
Praveen, my computer is not. Can you get the front one? The inflation.
You got it.
Wait, which one is it?
Oh, yeah.
What is this?
Just the inflation stuff.
Which part specifically?
The bottom is the 1.8%, 7% thing, but the rest is the warranty. Yeah.
Wait, sorry.
Yeah,
On EITC, the second term you read about UBI increasing wages.
Yes. Let me find it.
Yeah, but
You got it?
yeah, let me just highlight the part.
Yeah. I don't know a little bit more there.
So let me just highlight this one thing real quick. Yeah, you get it.
Wait, hold on. Sorry.
What is this?
This is the wages are gonna increase after you.
What does NIT mean?
It should say in the card. It says, oh, sorry, I could have made it bigger. So EIT's work when turning into INT providing every percent. It's a basic income for us to work.
Oh, wait, no, I know what NIT.
We'll continue on. Yeah, I think so. Fuck up. Hold on, let me write down. What if I use the table?
Yeah, you're good.
Oh, sorry.
Can you pass me my timer? We'll start by addressing turns on our case, and then quickly on framing, and then onto their case. Is everybody ready? Okay, and with that, let's begin. Let's start at the top of our case. They read that there's a benefit cliff, so people don't actually want to move upwards on the socioeconomic ladder. Realize two responses here. First of all, adults in 18 finds that fewer than 1% of able-bodied adults on the food stamps are within 10 percentage points of the eligibility limit, meaning that many individuals are a safe distance from the cliff or just providing them with the basic necessities to survive in the first place. Second of all, Adolphson continues that state programs also reduce benefits gradually and provide transitional benefits for up to 2 years, which drastically reduces the harms of any cliffs. This is how we're able to alleviate poverty for over 50 million Americans who live in box buildings. Even more so, let's talk about inflation. They read two responses. The first is that the money in circulation doesn't change, so businesses don't jack up the price. However, businesses know that now there's an additional $1,000 in every single person's pockets, and that's why these actually jack up the prices, because they think perceptually that it's an increase in every American purchasing power, and they see this as a way to make profits, and that's why they increase the price. That's why universal basic income, our charter concludes, has no actual benefit to the people. The second response they give is the inflation decrease. However, first of all, we call for the evidence. It talks about a basic income that's not universal. And second of all, they're talking about currency inflation, not price inflation of basic goods and services. To this point, none of these responses apply. Then let's go to EITC. They first read a turn about lowering wages and UBI solves. However, we call for the evidence. It's about NIT, not an actual universal basic income. They're different. So to that point, they can't make that distinction. This term doesn't exist. Then onto our subpoint B about Medicaid. They read a turn basically saying that Medicare is bad. However, overall, we would say this doesn't make any sense. Otherwise, people wouldn't have actually joined under the Medicare program in the Medicaid program in the first place. And second of all, we call for the evidence. It's only about transplant surgeries. And on net, the Himmelstein evidence conceded, which finds that 44,000 people are saved every single year because of Medicaid benefits. But then let's go to subpoint C about Section 8. They read three terms. The first is Olson, but essentially this is the same response from the benefit cliff, and ultimately I already responded to this at the top of case. Then they read two more terms about increasing rent. However, the Harvard evidence also accounts for this and finds that the price that people pay who are on Section 8 remains constant. The government just going to account for the increase in price if there actually is an increased price from the landlords. So to that extent, these terms just aren't on the flow. Then on to subpoint D about SNAP. The first term they read is about dependency. However, our argument is literally you either provide them with food or people have no food. SNAP literally provides food for 42 million people and reduces the food insecurity for these people by 30%. To that extent, Matthews finds that then the second response we get here is that people can actually can control money with the UBI. However, Matthews of Box finds in 2017 that if you were to remove these welfare benefits, people on net would lose $28,000 instead of a $12,000 loss. On net, this transition makes Americans actually lose thousands of more dollars. It's not actually a reason to vote for them, but actually a reason to vote for us. Let's go to their case. On framing, they read the Shepard evidence. However, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to give abusers and the abused the same amount of money. That's what UBI does. So to that extent, we just say it just perpetuates the problem. At the top, they talk about how welfare is specifically the problem for welfare is specifically the problem. However, we would say we can also link into their argument about IPV specifically through poverty, as Spencer 18 finds that living in poverty increases the risk of women and girls experiencing violence, and furthering that women that are living in poverty are far more vulnerable to sexual exploitation and violence. Even more so, let's talk about their first three ones. They're going to talk about stigma, retaliation, and preventing work. However, despite all these barriers, High 16 finds that statistics show that food welfare programs like SNAP are actually more likely to be controlled by the woman within the household rather than the men. So to that extent, it's actually much better because Heiss concludes that these cash transfers would actually lead to conflict over its use, while other welfare transfers actually decreases the probability of women actually experiencing controlled behavior or physical violence by 30%. All their evidence from empirics of Canada don't actually account for removing means-tested welfare. It's ultimately just in tandem. So to that extent, their empirics just aren't applicable here. Then onto their argument about life and independence. Realize Goodman 18 finds that welfare is literally the difference between life and death for women, specifically in these situations, because welfare is what provides them the safety net. On overall, $12,000 is not enough. That's why the Matthews evidence finds that ultimately you lose more money in the transition. None of their arguments actually make a lot of sense to the point where women actually lose out more in the affirmative world. For those reasons, we urge you to debate.
Ready?
Yeah, just one second.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go for it.
So you read me all these benefits like women get. So Women's Aid tells you 40% of these benefits get taken away. So how does that respond?
We would say that an imperfect system that benefits some versus an insufficient solution that benefits none is uneducated.
So the problem is that your imperfect solution, not only does it prevent women from getting welfare, it also perpetuates the issue.
Why is that so? 60% of them get benefits.
So I would say that the other, like, if 40% are getting, so the card specifically said 40% get their child care welfare benefits taken away. I would say the other 60% likely get other welfare benefits taken away. But I would say,
Wait,
if
hold
anything,
on. That needs
like,
to be
being in
carded,
an,
right?
I would say, huh?
That needs to be carded, right? We can't
No,
just assert
I
that,
mean, like, I would
60%
say
people just
if you're in
lose
an
benefits,
abusive
too.
relationship, you're likely to not be having any independence. Can we both agree on that?
Well, actually, the highest evidence finds that women are actually within households that have like intimate partner violence are actually much more likely to
Why?
actually have control of the
Why
welfare
is that?
in the first place.
Why would they be okay, so you're telling me your card says women in intimate partner violence households are more likely to have control.
Oh, yeah, like that's what the
Why
evidence
is
the
that?
highest
Explain that
evidence.
to me.
Oh, why do women have more control? I mean,
In an intimate partner violence home, like fundamentally, intimate partner violence is by our definition is when the abuser, which is usually a man, is abusing a woman, right?
Sure. Oh,
and like,
okay.
So my confusion is in those households, like, why would women have more control?
Sure. So the highest evidence does a comparative, not necessarily like just in the status quo, but the comparative between a UBI and the means test of welfare, and he finds that the means test
But
of
like,
welfare
could you explain the
provides more
warrant?
independence. Why?
Like, why would that be true?
Because probably like means test of welfare provides benefits like in things such as vouchers or food stamps, for instance, right?
Well,
Whereas
like-
universal basic
sure.
income, like the men within the household probably are going to become like even more abusive to the point where they just
But
want
why
to
would
take
that be
money,
possible
right?
if like they can't get access to the women's universal basic income?
It's probably like blackmail, threatening. Like I'm not really sure what goes through.
No,
their
so
mind.
like the problem is like the CFR evidence specifically tells you that it's unilaterally impossible for these men to access their money. You can have a question.
Yeah, I understand that, but just really quick on that.
Yeah, sure.
If it's unilaterally impossible to access
Mhm.
through coercion and blackmail, would it be possible?
No, because I would tell you that the reason why these women like leave the relationship in our world is because they know that they like have the opportunity for financial stability in the short term
sure.
because of the UBI, and in the long term they have increased bargaining power so they can get a better job.
Right.
So I would say like coercion and blackmail go away because they're no longer in the relationship. You can like ask them.
All right, so let's talk a little bit more about this. So you talk about this financial safety net that the UBI provides for women to exit the household, right?
Yep.
So where do they go after that?
So I would say in the short term, they can go to a friend's house because right now, like a lot of the reason why they can't leave is because they don't have the money to pay for like a train ticket and things like that can get them out of the house in the short term, right? But I would say in the long term, the fact that they would have increased bargaining power would lead them to have a job, which would pay for like a house and things like that. And y'all don't respond to it, so I don't know why you're making faces in second cross.
Oh,
Alright, let's just take a breath. I'm just thinking of it. Okay. Ready, I'll give you a theater. So it's gonna go framing, their case, our case. Alright. Is everyone good?
Yeah.
Let's start the time. Now, they completely dropped the framing. The shepherd evidence tells us that enforced ignorance makes women more vulnerable to sexual violence and the services they need become less accessible. If we believe that MTW is solving the issue, we prevent the root of the issue from being solved through policy making essentially sweep IPV under the rug. A ballot for the affirmative means that we prioritize these issues. This framing is conceded, it comes first on your ballot, literally kicks out all their offense. But they're going to try to come up here and link it through poverty. So let's take out all the extend all the turns on poverty. Go specifically to the EITC. Just extend the terminal defense. The Bell 19 evidence says that in order to get EITC, you need to work, but this excludes 75% of those who live in poverty. It's terminal defense. Then go on to Medicaid. They just say that our evidence is about transplant surgery. Literally call for it. That's not true. Our University of Virginia evidence specifically looks at 893,000 patients and says that they're 13% more likely to die as a result of Medicaid. They dropped the warranting. What Royal Forbes tells you is that because they don't get these hospitals don't get reimbursed, they literally neglect taking Medicaid patients in, which means that they never get access to their benefits. Then go to Section 8 housing. They say that they can cross-apply their response on benefit clips. No, they can't, because our response about Section 8 housing says that when you give them a UBI, it has a substantial disincentive effect on the poor to even seek a job, which is why they lose $3,600 in income, which is why in the long run this increases inequality. Then on SNAP, the court dropped the fraud term, which is very clean. The Chicago Tribune tells you that $1 billion are lost in fraud every single year, and as a result, 2 million people were literally kicked off of SNAP as a result of this fraud. It's completely conceded. It's like clean offense. At that point, all the terms are conceded. They have no link into domestic violence or IPV, which is the framing that's conceded in the round. The only side that has any sort of link into this is our side. Let's go to our case. They say that giving abusers and victims the same money doesn't do anything, but they drop the evidence that we read at the top from Pacific Standard that says that 73% of women have specifically not left the home because of financial abuse and because they don't have the money to do so. This means that even if you give the spouse money, they're still able to leave when you give them the money. They say that poverty controls the link. One, I turn their poverty, but two, they drop the NRDC evidence that says that 50% of those that live in poverty are specifically because they were IPV victims in the past, which means that we also control the link into their internal link. Then they say that women can control food and that's literally ridiculous. Our argument is that any financing that enters the house cannot be accessed by the women because the spouse takes it away. Where is the weighing really clean? Just extend our warrant on retaliation. They just say that our evidence doesn't account for welfare, but they literally dropped the Tarrant evidence says that only 3% of IPV victims actually get access to the welfare services. And you should buy the warranting because we took from the Women Aid evidence that 40% of abusers literally take the money away from these victims, which means that they never get access to it. This forces women to never come out and talk about it because they fear retaliation, because they fear that their abusers are going to do something to them. This is clean conceded. Welfare does not solve, which means our scope of solvency is really, really big. They say that $12,000 are not enough, but we say in the short term that UBI solved, and in the long term they drop the Taylor evidence that says that once women get the money, they have more bargaining power, which means that they can specifically get a job. That's why they're losing out on 8 million days of paid work. They dropped the uniqueness evidence from the Clapper, which specifically tells you that a UBI implementation would become with digitized bank accounts, which means that women would get their own bank accounts, which is crucial because the CFR tells you that now these spouses cannot unilaterally access their bank accounts, which means now they get access to a stable set of capital that they don't get access to right now. They just indict our evidence, but they completely dropped the Hoshfer evidence that says that looks at empirical study and says that UBI specifically reduced the forced sexual assault acts by 51%, which means that direct probability under case. But Angelotti tells you in the long term, when we have these victims leave, it creates a ripple effect where now they feel like it's more confident and that they can leave, which means in the long term, it's much more than the abuse that we just report right now. All of this is conceded. It's a pretty clean ballot.
I don't know.
Is everyone ready?
Mm-hmm.
The The round is over when they drop the Arquetto term that tells you that price inflation means that the purchasing power of the average consumer doesn't change. What the Arquetto term tells you is that when you give everybody a universal basic income, sellers know that they can charge more. That's empirically bad because when they charge more, the effect of UBI negates all effects of UBI. That what this means for the AF, it means that even if they grant them 100% of their links, it means that things like financial instability doesn't change because insofar as these people don't have increasing purchasing power, increasing dependence, it doesn't change a thing. But then, on their framing, they say that the best way to like bring intimate part IPV issues to the forefront of the news is through this through UBI. However, insofar as a UBI gives abusers and victims alike a minimum wage, that doesn't solve the problem as it roots. And so far as that's true, we go to their warrant. They only warrant they extend against Evan's response about how abusers can simply take the money is that there's such thing as ghost bank accounts. That literally doesn't make sense. Insofar as abusers can take welfare, they can also take the UBI. It doesn't make sense. The retaliation warrant flows to us. The reason why is because if retaliation and abuse and blackmail is the reason why they are able to coerce women into giving over welfare benefit, why isn't that the same true for UBI? It doesn't really make sense. I don't see how you can. I don't see how that doesn't apply to. But then, go to our case. On the Medicaid term, they try to extend this Medicaid term blithely through summary. They say that oh yeah, it increases the chance of death. Their Roy evidence is again really, really bad. It talks about transplants. It says on average, transplants are pretty bad. We would say that having some kind of Medicare insurance is still better than none. But then, on EITC, we're not going for that. We can see the terminal defense. But then, we're going for a subpoint EO SNAP. We say from the Carlson evidence that SNAP pulls millions of people out of poverty. In fact, it finds that provides food for 42 million people. That's really important because what the Radcliffe evidence tells you is that SNAP reduces the chance of food insecurity by more than 30%. In fact, Bahari finds that SNAP is the most effective way from eliminating food insecurity and breaking the intergenerational cycle of poverty in the long term. Their only response extended through summary is this thing about how there's fraud. Yeah, we would say that even if it's an imperfect system with some fraud, it still provides and pulls 42 million people out of poverty. Here's where we link in. We would say that we currently have the cleanest link into preventing IPV because on their side, women don't fight. On their side, the Arquetto term completely takes down their entire case. While we would say that Evan extend the response that Evan says that poverty increases the chance of intimate partner violence by 7-fold. We have the cleanest link into preventing intimate partner violence insofar as when you get rid of all means tests of welfare, it pushes 42 million people into poverty. You can sign your ballot right there.
Alright, are y'all ready?
Yeah.
So, did y'all kick out of housing?
Hold on.
Sorry.
They're reading IPV.
Oh, okay.
Alright, are y'all ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so, y'all just said in your second summary that you kick out of Section 8 housing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do you kick out of a turn?
Because it's either you have a home or you have no home.
Yeah.
So
Wait,
you're saying
wait,
the
no.
is better.
Wait, what? That doesn't even make
Wait,
sense.
we
Our
took that
turn
from
is that let me just explain the turn and I'll explain why it's a turn because what our Olson evidence just goes clean through says that basically when you give a person a UBI then there would be a substantial disincentive effect on the poor, which as a result would cause incomes to fall by 3.6K.
No. The Section 8 housing turn is that because just simply the existing of housing
Wait.
vouchers we saw.
Oh yeah, it creates not UBI. Yeah, it creates a disincentive on the poor when they give them vouchers to pay for their homes, which is why we saw a $3,600 net loss in income. That turn goes conceded. So if you guys are trying to impact into poverty and that's the only link y'all have into our framing, then how do you win poverty? Yeah, so the terminal impact. So this round is pretty much over because the framing is conceded. The framing is conceded that IPV comes first. So the only thing that matters in today's round is if you can link your case into IPV. It's never made clear how SNAP can link into IPV because all you say is that people the people that are in poverty, that they're going to be affected. But you drop two front lines, which is actually the most important front line, which is that 50% of those who are in poverty were DV victims before. So we solve for your internal link, and that's pretty much the only offense that matters in today's round because you've conceded the framing.
What?
So the framing is very explicit in saying that we consider IPV at the top. We kick all offense that doesn't link into IPV.
Yeah.
Insofar as the only offense you have in this round is SNAP, and you never implicate specifically, even in your summary, how IPV connects to SNAP. You just say, oh, if women get benefits, then I guess they won't be like IPV victims. You lose the round.
No. I'm pretty sure ISIC does the implication because in food insecure places, it pushes people families into
So
poverty.
wait, I have a can I
and
ask a
then
question real quick?
from there, From
So,
there, like, then that's when like.
Let's talk about that.
Okay.
So if SNAP is decreasing poverty, as you say, then how come domestic violence is not like? Why is it still such a big problem? And why is it like the rates of domestic violence increasing?
No, but you just say that when you get rid of SNAP, you push 42 million people into poverty.
No, but
that's
that's-
the
No, but
increase
once
of the
again,
SNAP.
none of that offense exists because you're not interacting with IPV. You can
It's
see
fine.
the
We're just going
framing.
in circles at this point.
Alright,
You're gonna have a question.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about ghost bank accounts. So what does this actually mean?
Okay, basically it's very, very clean. Clapper tells you that the most likely system that will be used for UBI is the digitized bank system. That's because a lot of women and a lot of homeless people right now in the status quo don't have like an ability to get money from the government,
Also,
so they
like,
have
So
to
how do
create
they get
bank
money
accounts.
with a digitized?
Yeah. So basically, like when you have a digitized UBI system, the idea is that because like you can't track who the money goes to empirically, which you drop empirically in India, for example, we saw a creation of 260 million bank accounts because then people individually can access basic income. Like that's by definition what a basic income seeks to do. It allows for every single individual to get access to their own money, and that's why the creation of bank accounts happened in the past when we saw UBI implementation. The empirics is dropped, so like it's 100% probable.
Sure.
Okay.
Right, that's fine.
Wait, we'll just like take the
I
rest of
think
it.
there's like 30 seconds probably. Yeah. You know, I know. So,
One is Snap. They tried one is Snap. They never realized why Snap is terribly helping the drop the like pre-diagnosis. The second thing is that they see inflation. They never quantify how much it is. This is a turn, but there's no quantification of how much inflation goes up. It seems that the turn can't be evaluated. But then our analytic is that if people were truly not able to buy anything, then they would just bring prices back down. Because then the business don't make a profit. I extend all like 3% and like 40%.
Yeah.
All that stuff.
Okay. So I'm gonna go framing, their case, our case. All right. Insofar as they concede the Shepard framing, it means that we only consider any offense on their side that links into IPV. At that point, they have two things standing. First, on Snap, they don't respond to the term that we read consistently, which is the Chicago Tribune, which tells you fraud exists, which means that 2 million people can't get access to the benefits they talk about. But second, on inflation, I would say there's no quantification, so you can't vote off of this entire thing. But if anything, in rebuttal, we mentioned how specifically, if people can't afford, their impacts are in the short term, because in the long term, companies would realize people can't afford and bring prices back down. But if anything, even if inflation was true, in all of the cases where we saw UBI implemented, we shouldn't have seen DV go down, but we did see IPV still go down, which means inflation has literally no correlation. At the point in which their offense has no link into our actual framing, this is why we win. Insofar as at the NCTV tells you that 50% of people are in poverty right now because of IPV, that's super clean for us. But why is welfare bad? Because Terror tells you that only 3% of victims get the IPV services they need right now. And Women's Aid tells you that 40% of victims get their services taken away. And that's why it's really important, because 73% of women specifically tell you that the reason why they're staying in their abusive relationship right now is specifically because of financial control. At that point, the biggest impact in this round is the uniqueness that they completely dropped. They literally admit to it in Grand Cause. Insofar as Clapper tells you that the creation of digitized bank accounts is the most likely implementation of the UBI, which would prevent ghost recipients, so like the men in these relationships, from taking control. That's why the CFR tells you that in India, we saw 250 million new bank accounts be created, and men could not unilaterally access these bank accounts. That means women individually get this money and can use it for what they want. That's why Taylor tells you that they can pursue a job in the long run because of their increased bargaining power, and that's why we're seeing 8 million work days going to be given to these women. At the end of the day, Hoshoffer tells you that when you implemented a UBI, we saw a 51% decrease in IPV, but Anzalotti tells you that if we give women rights now, it creates a ripple effect. So in the short term, we're impacting the women we talk about in the case, but in the long term, we're impacting women around the world.
Well done. How much prep do you have left?
it'll start on their case and then our case. Is everybody ready?
Yeah.
Okay. They go for the retaliation warrant in their first contention. However, recognize that if this retaliation warrant is true, then to the same extent, a UBI is not actually the way to solve the problem. The reason being is explained by Isaac. Because of coercion and retaliation, and all these threats still exist in both worlds, even if abusers don't have direct access to the quote-unquote ghost bank accounts that they talk about, through threats they can still get access because women are ultimately pushed into a corner where they literally have no other choice, otherwise risk more retaliation in the first place. So to that extent, this literally means that in both worlds, universal basic income just isn't the solution. This retaliation still exists, and it's not the way to solve the problem. Then, second of all, even if you don't end up buying that the Archetto evidence, they don't contest this at all in summary. It's literally cold conceded. They can't make new responses in first final focus to something that was completely dropped. Archetto finds that a universal basic income will cause price inflation because sellers now know that people can pay more since they think that everybody has $1,000 more in their pocket every single month, which means they think that they have a higher purchasing power. However, that's incredibly problematic because that means that it negates all the possible benefits of a UBI. The reason being is because they jack up the prices of goods and services. What that means, their entire case is contingent on women having more financial capabilities to leave the household afterwards because of a UBI. But to the point where that money literally doesn't increase their purchasing power because all goods and services have increased in price because businesses have jacked them up, there's no reason to actually evaluate this argument first. Even more so. On net, it's much worse for women because welfare benefits are ultimately worth more than just a simple $1,000 a month. To that point, we have the best way into actually helping women exit the household. It's like the best risk of solvency here. Then on to our case. It's pretty easy to vote on SNAP. They just try to extend mitigatory defense, but on net, Carlson finds that SNAP pulls millions of people out of poverty, providing food for 42 million, and in fact, Radcliffe finds that SNAP provides food insecurity, decreases food insecurity by 30%. In fact, poverty actually increases the chance of violence within households in the first place. So to that extent, if we're able to best break this cycle, which Bahari finds is breaking the cycle of intergenerational poverty through SNAP, and it's the most effective way, we have the best solvency here for their case in general. We link it to the framing, and for those reasons, we urge you to mediate.